Greetings, my friends. Mkwann here. Gregorian calendar date October 22nd, 2025. For those of you that keep track of the moment using the tropical zodiac, it's 29 degrees Libra. And we got a video here. And this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be a little bit different than the type of videos I've been putting out recently, which I would describe as more like storytelling, story deciphering. This is going to be more about like games, maybe. I am calling this Lucid in the Dream, Disentangled from the Matrix. And so, Lucid in the Dream, whether you call it the dream, whether you call it the mystery, there has been seemingly a long history of individuals who recognize that whatever the hell this realm is, it's not as it appears. Whether you call this Maya or dream or mystery, it doesn't really matter. And a lot of spiritual practices, like Eastern spiritual practices, are based upon this awaking from the dream. And I use the word lucid a little on purpose. And my particular interest isn't so much like, oh, this is a dream, it's not what we think it is, as much as it is like, well, we're here and it seems to be a dream, and there are principles, there are rules about this dream, and once one becomes aware that this isn't exactly what it appears to be, and if you can learn the rules, well, then your role in the dream changes. Just like if you fall asleep and you become lucid in that dream, you can begin to change it. Now, the second part of the title is Disentangled from the Matrix. And one of probably the primary driver of the dream experience is consciousness. And consciousness is admittedly like a broad term, a nebulous term. Like, it certainly has a mind element, but it's more than just thinking. And one of the qualities, or one of the principles of the dream and consciousness is the role of entanglement. Basically, where you're putting your mind and how you're putting your mind, or maybe more so where you're putting your attention and how you're defining what you're looking at. And like in the movie Inception, where there's a dream within a dream within a dream, that is how this realm works. And there's a primary dream, which we are all living within in the dreamscape. So we could call it the realm, the dreamscape. And then there are dreams within the dreamscape. And the primary one, we could call it the matrix, or we could call it the paradigm, or, whatever the hell you want to call it. But it exists because people are holding it in place. They've been conditioned to hold it in place, and they don't realize they're holding it in place, and they don't even realize that it's a dream. And so that's kind of how it works. So the entire idea in which I'm trying to share with people is like, this is a dream, this is a mystery, and this mystery has rules or principles. So there's that, but then even more so, that there is a false dream that if you don't recognize that, one, it's a dream, and two, how you are holding it in place, and for the most part, this dream is not serving you as an individual. The skill or the awareness that I want to bring is like, this is how you disentangle consciousness from the matrix, from the false dream that is the primary narrative which we're all experiencing. So with that said, that's what this video is about. I mean, really, that's what all these videos about. Like, whenever I tell these stories, whenever I show like these interconnections, it's not so much like to get lost in that, because that's, you're stuck in the paradigm, because you're like thinking about it, and you're like, you know, the bad guys and the trickery, and there is some truth to that. But it's like the Wizard of Oz. Like, you know, once you see that there's the Wizard of Oz and they're kind of faking it, you can move outside of it. And when that happens, well, then you become the captain of your own ship in this dreamscape. So that being said, let's just jump right in. So I'm going to begin with going back to the last video I made. The one about the Charlie Kirk, or Charlie Church, and the architect. And I concluded that video with a little bit of a mind experiment where I talked about ice and melting in 33 degrees and 32 degrees in Celsius and Fahrenheit. And that had two purposes. One was, I think it's a pretty cool exercise. And then secondly, it was a demonstration of, once you recognize how the dream works, or the principles of the dream, how you can begin to create your own. And so I got a decent amount of feedback from that. People who I know personally who watched the video, a bunch of them had sent me messages just with comments and questions. And so this one here is from my boy Jason. And so he said, have you done the 33 ice cube exercise? And I say, just 1 hour before the video is when I made it up. And so that's true. So I had been aware of this idea of ice and ice melting and it being tied to 32 and 33 degrees for a long time. And when I first heard of that, it was when I used to listen to a lot this guy right here, Cutting Through the Matrix with Alan Watt. About 15 years ago, when I started really delving into, you know, how the paradigm works and how the matrix works, this was my primary teacher, if you will, this guy Alan Watt. The dude's phenomenal. And I haven't listened to him for like 10 years or so. And in making this video, I went back to his website, and he's still around. His website looks exactly as it did in 2010. And I recommend him. He's great. And I just want to give credit. It was some time ago that I heard him once mention about ice at 32 degrees and 33 degrees, and that just stuck with me. So when I came up with that video, it had been in my mind, like the idea, or when I came up with that exercise, the idea of 33 and 32 degrees and ice and melting and so forth had been in my mind for a long time, and I just kind of linked it to the spine. All of that was made up or came from my imagination, if you will. On a slight pivot, I'll come back. Alan Watt is different than the counterculture 1960s philosopher Alan Watts. And they're very different. Alan Watts is very kind of like mystical and philosophical, and Alan Watt is very, very grounded. Like, this is the conspiracy, and this is the books, and here are the books, and here are the people, and this is how it works. And when I think of as an individual, as mkwann, right, as my perspective, I would say I'm highly influenced from the two of them, and there's something really, really ironic. I would say I'm a blend of the two of them, and there's something ironic about just the fact that their names are so similar. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. My pivot comes back. So, okay. So this is where it began. It was 33, 32 degrees. The video, I dealt with the ice cube and water, but it also was originated from the series of videos I did about Charlie Church. This is where it gets kind of funny and interesting. So shortly after that video was released, I saw on the news this article. It was Trump posthumously awards Charlie Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Came out on October 14th. I'm going to say October 10th is when I released that video. And it said that the Presidential Medal of Freedom was awarded on Kirk's 32nd birthday. And I just start laughing to myself. I think this is rather funny because I know what my conscious motivation was for coming up with that 32, 33 degree ice cube experiment or a little practice at the end of that video. And I know that I wasn't consciously aware that Kirk, one, he was turning 32, and then secondly, that he was going to get a Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then even funnier is the fact that, the phrase to put someone on ice is underworld slang for being killed or taken out of action. So within my own, laughing at the ridiculousness of my life and the information which I share and the fact that people listen to it, I'm just laughing at how this works. But this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So I saw this and I was like, was this, my first question was the release or the awarding of the Medal of Freedom, was that a surprise? When was that released? When did that come about that Charlie Church was going to get this medal? And I did a little bit of research, and just on Wikipedia, I found this. It said on September 11th, so the day after the event, President Trump announced that he would award Church the Medal of Freedom. And I know I had been to the Wikipedia page before, as I used that to just get background information on the Church character. Now, I don't remember reading this paragraph, but there's probably a good chance that I did. And that is kind of like an indication or an example of how we feed into things, or like how the outer world affects the inner world, affects the outer world, and it just exists beneath our threshold of awareness. It happens to me. It happens to all of us. And so I can't say for certain that I saw this. The only thing I can say for certain is I don't remember reading it. But there's a good chance that I did see it. And, does that go in the deeper parts of my awareness and my consciousness and then drive something else? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm just kind of demonstrating how it is, even when we're aware of how things work, that we're still part of whatever we're putting our attention to, including someone like myself who puts a lot of energy into disentangling. But then it got a little bit more fun. So I see that it was September 11th when it was announced that he would be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And in many ways, the Presidential Medal of Freedom is in resonance with the Freemasonic concept of the Grand Architect. But even more interesting was if it was awarded to Kirk on his 32nd birthday, which was October 14th, and it was announced on September 11th that he would get it. Well, there's 33 days in between. So I definitely, if I unconsciously read this little paragraph weeks ago, I definitely didn't do the mathematics to count the 33 days. So that's kind of interesting, and really just for, it's interesting for the investigation in terms of like, how does consciousness work? How do we build the dream? How is it that when we put our attention and awareness on something that we begin to form a feedback loop with it? Is it possible that not only did I see it, but then unconsciously I did the math? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But this is definitely what I did not know. So the Presidential Medal was awarded on the 14th, and there was a ceremony. I didn't watch the ceremony, but they had the transcript online. So I go and I look at the transcript, and I don't read it, but I did a search, and I was looking for the numbers 32 and 33, and sure enough, what do I find? That here it says, this is the transcript from what Donald Trump said. It said October 14th is Charlie's birthday, and he should have been turning 32 years old. So that was said. This is where the number 32 was mentioned, in the only time the number 32 was mentioned in that speech, and it just so happened to be at the 32-minute mark. And I looked for ice and I looked for water in there just to see if that would pop up in the transcript. But I didn't see ice, but what you see is in the very beginning of the transcript, right here at the first thing that was said. So this wasn't the president. This was like background noise, but was included in the transcript because it's just AI generated. Is the, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth word was water. So, whatever that is, we see that we can see these interconnections, and particularly for individuals like ourselves that are interested in becoming lucid in the dream, and we see what happens when we begin to place our awareness on anything, on really anything. So let's keep moving forward. The next thing Jason says to me is, he asks me, what does he say? So, your 33 ice cube exercise is the same logic as your Rodman rebound idea. Yeah? Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought of it that way. And he says, I'm just trying to wrap my head around your concepts of grounding consciousness. So Jason is watching the grounding consciousness videos. And in the grounding consciousness program, one of the key ideas which I introduce is what I call the Dennis Rodman principle. It's in module 2. And the description is the Dennis Rodman principle, focused timing in natural astrology, connects disciplined observation to natural astrology using celestial movements to align with life's flow. And so the key words are the Dennis Rodman principle, natural astrology, baseline reality, attention and focus, inner world, outer world, celestial movements. So the 30-second explanation of the Dennis Rodman principle is that Dennis Rodman, who is arguably the greatest rebounder in NBA history, used to have an unusual practice where he would study and count the rotations of the basketball of all of the different shooters on his team and the opposing team, and somehow that is connected to his ability to being the best rebounder. And the thing that makes rebounding so interesting in basketball is it's the most subjective skill. Like, you could only practice so much, because rebounding is ultimately about being in the right place at the right time. And there is the Dennis Rodman principle basically shows that when you place your rational mind, your lower mind, your linear mind, your thinking mind in a highly focused way in something that is similar to what your true intention is. And in the Dennis Rodman example, that is rebounding, that something kind of mysterious happens. Like you do it, it works out for you. And that is one of the principles of the dream, particularly how you use the linear mind or lower mind. So I want to show you a little clip from the video, or from the course. You might be asking me, like, what the hell are you talking about? What principle is this pointing to? So I appreciate your patience, because I'm getting there. The act of counting rotations did something miraculous. It naturally aligned Dennis Rodman with the focal point of the game, the ball, and it brought him to the right place in the right time, bringing this back to our model of inner world, outer world connection. Whatever you place your focus on, what you are paying your attention to, and how you are defining it, defines what the life experience would be. He applied so much concentration and focus in his inner world on this ball, the thing which he wanted to be near or to get. This tangible thing happened. He was in the right place at the right time. It didn't matter what he was doing. It didn't matter that he was counting rotations. He could have been trying to read the words on the basketball at every time the ball was shot. What mattered was the quality and caliber in which he used his rational mind. Remember that Einstein quote is, the rational mind is the servant of the intuitive mind. He placed his servant as focused as he could on the ball, and it was for the purpose of being in the right place at the right time. The practice of natural astrology, my friends, is no different than Dennis Rodman counting the rotations on the ball. So this is a principle. And when you begin to understand how consciousness works, and there are many parts of consciousness, like it's mind and it's thinking, and there's rational mind and all these different things. When you become literate in at least the language of consciousness, well, then that's when the skill of being able to be lucid in the dream really begins to take form. And so this is where I highly recommend and desire for everyone who watches this to get the course. But don't stop now and go and order it, because at the end of this video I got a little game as it relates to this course. So hold off on any desire for that. Let's keep on moving forward. Where are we? So now we're going to do another exercise. We're going to do another exercise right now. So in this exercise, you're going to have to use your hand. And what I want you to do is get comfortable in your seat, wherever you're sitting. Hopefully you're sitting. You're still as you're listening to this. And place your hand maybe on your knee, or if there's a table in front of you, place it down on there. And just relax that hand. Relax that arm. And you're going to know it's relaxed because it's going to start to feel heavy. That's the muscles in your arm are starting to get, as they relax, you're going to feel the heaviness. And I want you to stare at your hand. And I want you to stare at your hand. And I want you to relax your arm. And then in your head space, in your inner world, in your head space, while you're staring at your hand, I want you to command your hand to rise up, to like lift up. So you're looking at your hand. Like lift. You don't say it though. You don't say it with your mouth. Just say it in your head. But don't actually raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Just look at it. Just look at your hand. So if you do that correctly, your hand doesn't rise up. If it did rise up, well, that send me an email, but there's something else is going on. But your hand shouldn't have risen up. You know, you're looking at it, you're commanding your hand, and it doesn't rise up. Now what I want you to do is go back to looking at your hand again, relaxing your arm. And then whenever you're ready, just move your hand. Move your hand, let it rise up from the table. And then go back and do the same thing again about keeping your hand on the table and focusing on it and commanding it to rise, and see that it doesn't rise. Like, it's not like your hand is trying to rise up and then you have to split your mind and hold your hand down. Like, it's not rising. And so this is real subtle. This is a really, really subtle thing, which what I'm trying to kind of bring you to. But there's a difference. There's something that happens within you. Like when you actually move your hand, you're not thinking that you're going to move your hand. You're not like commanding it. Something else within you is doing that. And it's very different than the actual conscious words that go on in your like thinking head. And the more you begin to pay attention, like asking yourself the question, like, well, what part of me is actually moving the hand? How am I making that command? And this is a rhetorical question. I mean, I can't answer that question. I'm unable to articulate what that subtlety is. But the more you begin to look at it and just being open to the fact that there's a difference between when you actually move something and when you're trying to command something, you're going to begin to recognize that there are different parts of your consciousness. And I'm going to go as far as suggesting that the part of you that moves your hand, the part of you that has the control that moves your hand, that's who you are. That's who I am. And it's very different than the part of you that speaks in your head. And most people, particularly those people who are lost in the dream, not only are lost in the dream, they're lost in the dream and lost in the paradigm. They live from the perspective that they are the voice in their head. I've been playing with this idea of like moving my hand and one, like trying to really articulate what exactly or who exactly or what that skill is to move that hand. Not necessarily to come up with the specific answer, but to become more aligned with whatever that part of me is, to bring that into closer awareness, to study it in the same way that Dennis Rodman counts the spinning basketball. And I'll do this. I will practice moving my hands and becoming like really aware of what it's like to move my hand. And then I'll shut my eyes. And maybe there's a glass nearby. Maybe there's something else on the table that's nearby. My eyes are shut. And I try to do the same thing to make the glass rise up. But I do it with my eyes shut to eliminate any sort of desire or pressure which I would create on myself, which would be like, oh, I didn't do it right. The glass didn't rise up. I didn't get it right. And so by having my eyes shut, I theoretically don't know. In fact, I even say that when I'm going to raise it and make it fall, I'm going to do it so smoothly that I can't even hear it. So I wouldn't know if it happened or not. And the point of that is to just play around with this idea of how malleable is the dream. And it's not to necessarily be able to make things float as much as it is to do this Dennis Rodman principle, which is like what happens when I align the rational mind to something else, which is related to what I want to do, which is to understand the limitations, and I don't think there are any limitations, of the dream realm. So, okay, that's a good one for you guys. And we'll keep moving forward. So this is phenomenal. I think this is great. So it's called the coffer illusion. And the coffer illusion is a pretty simple optical illusion. And when you see it, it's this optical illusion which can either be seen as squares or circles. So let me pull it up for you right now. If you want, you can pause right now and look at it. And when you look at this, you're either going to see circles or squares. Chances are, if you're watching this, I'm willing to bet that you see squares. But there are circles in here. There are circles. And so maybe you can't see it. If you want, I'm going to go show you the circles right now. If you want to figure it out yourself, well, then pause it and keep on watching it till you do. But so right here, I highlighted the circle. And now can you see this circle right here? And can you see this circle right here? And you can see this circle right here. And maybe now the circles are more evident or obvious. And if you're particularly adept at optical illusions, you can maybe see both simultaneously, see the squares and the circles. So the question is, like, well, why are you showing me this optical illusion? Well, I'm going to tell you why. So this study came out in August 2024. Major urban-rural differences in perception of a visual illusion. And so, I don't know, whoever the people are who were behind this study, I think they were like neuroscientists or something. They used this optical illusion and they showed it to two groups of people. Those that lived in the US and the UK were participants, and then there are people who are from Nabindian Himba. I think that's in Africa. It sounds African. And the Nabindian Himbas were from traditional villages. And what they discovered was that 97% of the people who were born and raised in a Western civilization, so this is independent of any ethnicity, but it has to do completely with the culture in which they were raised, those people, 97% of them saw squares. And 96% of the participants from the traditional villages only saw circles or saw circles first. And so the article is kind of, I mean, there are a lot of ways which people would take the extract a meaning from the results of this. But what I want to focus on is that consciousness is this, like, you know, I'm talking about the Dennis Rodman stuff, and like maybe that's like metaphorical, and maybe that's a little bit kind of too subjective or too non-material. But this is material as it can be. It's like literally what you see. And it took me a while. It took me a couple of minutes before I was able to see these circles. I had to look at this in the same manner that you would look at a magic 3D eye picture. And I was able to eventually see it. And apparently some people can't. Same thing with Magic 3D Eye pictures, is they're unable to see through the obvious image. What this points to is this is how powerful your consciousness is. What the consciousness that you experience has been completely shaped by the culture which you were born in. And if you're watching this video, you were most likely born in a Western culture where you went through school and, you know the metric system or the standard system and all the different systems. And all of those systems have created a way to perceive reality. And that's not just a concept in terms of how I conceptually see reality, but how you physically, literally see reality. And I'm assuming prior to these people who did this study in 2024, like, it was unknown. Like, there was not a recognition that there was a correlation between being raised in an environment which is heavily constructed on right angles. That's what our architecture is in the Western world, that it influences how you literally see reality. And the question becomes, like, how many other things in our blind spots are we not even realizing that we are literally seeing? Definitely conceptually seeing, that we don't even realize that we're seeing it in a particular way. This again is this ties into the idea of disentanglement from the matrix and becoming lucid in the dream. It's not so much about, like, oh, let me go and figure out all of my blind spots, as much as it is to recognize that that's part of this process, is knowing that you have a blind spot. And that's really hard for a lot of people to accept and recognize, particularly someone who is intelligent, someone who is known for like mental acuity, to then have the humility to recognize that, like, that maybe that there's something they don't see. Which then brings me to this next video. This popped up in Instagram for me, and I think that it really it plays into what I'm talking about right now. So it's the power of whimsy to break out of blind spots. So let's watch this.
Neuroscience shows that activating your whimsy is actually a pro-level brain hack, and I'll tell you the science behind why. When you take everything too seriously and you stop being playful, your brain shifts. The amygdala, your brain's threat detector, takes over, and the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for problem solving and creativity, shuts down. This is why everything starts to feel heavier and more difficult. It's actually biologically harder to focus and create. But the moment you bring back whimsy and you allow yourself to play, the brain gets the signal for safety. Also, when you are having more fun with things, your brain releases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically fertilizer for your brain. It boosts neuroplasticity and allows your brain to rewire faster, learn deeper, and remember longer. Play also activates your dopamine system, not for achievement, but for curiosity, which is why it feels so good to explore and be weird, because your brain is rewarding you for being alive. But whimsy doesn't just make you happier, it also makes you better. Studies show that play puts your brain in optimal performance zone. It boosts creativity, lowers cortisol, strengthens your immune system, and even increases longevity. Life is a game, and whimsy helps you keep leveling up without losing the fun. Like Alan Watts said, don't separate work and play, it's all play.
I hope you caught the Alan Watts comment at the end. Now, I want to be clear, just because there's a study, like, I like studies, I guess, but, I don't put too much into it, because studies come from the paradigm, and it's a paradigm thinking. But if our purpose, or at least what my purpose here is beginning to point out the thresholds of becoming lucid in the dream, and then being able to disentangle from the matrix, not taking it seriously is a big part of it for many reasons. This one particular video talks about why having fun or whimsy when we look at the stuff like the horrors of someone, supposedly executed before everyone's eyes. Like, I mean, that's a horrible concept. But then if you can be playful with it, because the whole thing is a friggin' dream, well, then you begin to shift out of that space and it begins to change. So let's go back to this. I talked about this a bunch in the last two videos. I still haven't gone deep into it, but it's this idea of how all of these different emotionally charged narratives, which are seemingly disconnected, pushed through the mainstream, are connected, and they're all kind of emptying out into this Pluto going unbound, which happened on August 29th of 2025. And the implication is that's when shit's going to get crazy. And as I said before, it's also being tied into this like story. It's just a story in the dream, but you can make them real, the stories, or you can have people hold them in their consciousness so that within the dream it shows up. It's tied into this false age of Aquarius. And if you actually look at the stories that are in the news right now, I mean, it's friggin' crazy. I have thought many times over the past 15 or 20 years, I'm like, all right, this is it. They've been preparing us for it. It's Project Bluebeam time, or it's the next this or the next that. And I have, there have been times where I was like, prepping. And, let me make certain I got all the stuff ready so that when the thing happens, because everything seems to be getting crazy right now, it's got to be happening, that I'm prepared. And I've been through that, probably like 2 or 3 times where literally, like in my heart of hearts, I'm like, this is going to be it. And it wasn't, where, I eventually stopped caring. Like, I've gone down, fool me once, that whole sort of thing. So I don't know if right now, if this is going to be another one of those, because they're certainly pumping it right now. It certainly feels more extreme, even more extreme than maybe the summer following COVID, which was, a time where it appeared to be like, now's when the revolution breaks out, but maybe it's not. Maybe in another 6 months it calms down again and they just keep on edging everyone. Edge, edge, edge. Regardless, meet it with a sense of whimsy. Regardless of what happens, you're meeting it with a sense of whimsy. Meeting it with a fun. Meeting it with an understanding that, the desire is to become lucid in the dream in order to influence the dream. And how you really influence the dream is not only learning the principles, but then also recognizing if you are entangled within the matrix storyline. All right. So from there, I've got a couple more things I want to cover in this video. Now I want to go and tell a story. This is a personal story. Zach, Amish, and the Chinese. All right. So this was last week. And I'm kind of making my final rounds in Pennsylvania. I'm getting ready to move out, and I'll get to that in a moment. But one of my final rounds was I was invited to dinner at friends of mine's house, Zach and Emily. And they live on a dairy farm in like rural Pennsylvania, nowhere Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, probably about 45 minutes where I'm staying, 45 minutes away from where I'm staying here in Harrisburg. And so I'm at the dinner. I have dinner, and then me and Zach, we walk into the the barn where all the cows are and the barn cats. And I don't know. I love doing stuff like this. I love being outside of my element. And Zach's a good friend. And Zach's a younger man. I'm probably, I've got maybe 20 years more experience than he has, but I greatly enjoy his company. And I think he started following my work, and from that we became friends, him and his partner Emily and their beautiful daughter Willow. So anyway, so Zach's real interesting. He is, I would describe him as very earthy. And what I mean by that is he moves slow, he thinks slow, he speaks slowly, but he's very thoughtful in his way. And he's a really interesting, thoughtful thinker too. I think that's maybe why some of my work resonates with him, is because it gives him, he's willing to take a pause, and in his pause, he's willing to think of things in other ways. So that being said, Zach told me the best story, and I'm going to share this story with you. So Zach does a lot of odd jobs, and one of his odd jobs is that he drives around the Amish. And if you don't live in a community which has a Amish population, you might be unaware, but that's a thing. Like, there are non-Amish people who are paid to drive the Amish around, like when the Amish don't want to take their horse and buggy. And Zach does that from time to time. And he does it specifically with a particular Amish family, and they helps them in their business and so forth. They have a construction company. And so what, all right, sorry about that. I got interrupted. Where was I with that story? So you drive around the Amish, and that's what Zach does. And he's developed a relationship with this one, like, Amish family, or maybe a particular individual. I think it's maybe like two brothers. And one of the brothers, it was his birthday, and they were going to throw him a surprise party, and Zach was invited to come to the surprise party, which is really a big deal. Like, the Amish community is pretty closed, and if you are not within it, to be invited into something so personal as a surprise birthday party is relatively uncommon, and is reflective, I think, of just, the trust and the value which probably those Amish guys had with Zach. So this is how the surprise party was being set up. I think it was the wife of the guy whose birthday it was suggested that they go out to dinner for his birthday. And then when they arrived at where they went out to dinner, all of the family and friends were there, and it was a surprise. And so it turns out that the place that this surprise party was going to be was at a Chinese buffet. So it's a Chinese buffet in a strip mall in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Real crappy, if you will. And Zach is, he's a farmer, and he's very aware of food, and just like all of the bullshit which comes around, or which is involved with a lot of the mass produced food. So he was a little bit, like, one, surprised, and then secondly, not interested in going to a strip malled Chinese buffet. But same time, he was happy to go there. And he was also aware of the irony of, the unusualness of, like, Amish and a Chinese buffet and so forth. And so they go, and the guy comes and surprise and so forth. So it turns out that the reason why this particular Chinese buffet was selected is in a local, like, magazine or something. There is a coupon, and the coupon is children under the age of 5 eat for free. And this guy has a bunch of kids, and a bunch of them are under the age of 5. He has like a baby and maybe a toddler and a 4-year-old and maybe a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, 10-year-old, so forth. And, no, the Amish are cheap. So as the night is unfolding, the guy who owns the restaurant wants to go around, and he sees all these children, and he wants to know which ones are eating for free and which ones he's going to get paid for. And the guy who's doing this, like, English is not his first language. I don't know if he speaks Mandarin, but his English is kind of broken, older guy. And he is going around the table, and this is what Zach is telling me. He's like, the owner of the Chinese restaurant is going around the table, and he's more or less asking the children, like going up to each child, and he's asking how old they are. And he's asking in his broken English. And meanwhile, like, yes, the Amish speak English, but for most, their first language is Pennsylvania Dutch, which is like a dialect of normal German. And though they speak English, if you speak English with an Amish person, you're going to notice that the grammar is different than how we speak. Like the way they structure sentences are sometimes it's going to sound odd. So Zach finds himself in the situation where he sees this guy who barely speaks English, is going around asking the age of the children of each child, and then this kind of miscommunication with the Amish who don't understand the Mandarin, but then also aren't speaking back in the King's English, if you will. Meanwhile, Zach was saying, the guy, the owner of the restaurant, was also kind of tickled by the fact that there are all these like Amish children there, and he's playing with them. Like, there's a universal human truth that we like children. We like babies. Like, babies do something with us. And so Zach was telling me, it was like the guy was kind of like playing with the child, like grabbing its hands, like poking its belly. And Zach was saying it was not exactly the way which we would normally expect in America, would expect a stranger to be touching your child. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was also kind of like strange. And there's already cultural barriers that exist between the English, that's what the Amish would refer to anyone who's not English, and the Amish. And Zach's watching this whole thing like just unfolding, and just kind of like, this is unusual. And that's kind of Zach's way. He's very thoughtful and very slow and in his mind. And he's just watching like the kind of the clusterfuck that this whole thing is and the ridiculousness that it was happening. And then what happens is there was a trucker, like literally a guy who drives an 18-wheeler in backwoods, Pennsylvania. And he was picking up takeout. And as he was walking out of the restaurant, he sees what's happening, and he inserts himself into the situation. This trucker does, whereas the trucker thinks that he's going to be the translator, and the trucker doesn't speak Mandarin, and he definitely doesn't speak Pennsylvania Dutch, and he somehow is going to go and make everything all right. And Zach's watching the whole thing, and he's like, it seems to be building in tension, but then all of a sudden, like, I don't know exactly what the trucker said, but he said the right thing in the right way. And the whole table like kind of bursts out in laughter, and then everything like resolves itself. So what's the point of me telling you this story? So what's the point? I don't know if this is accurate or not, but this is at least one of the stories I like to tell myself, and I'm very playful with it. I don't know what this realm is, but my sense is that whatever this realm is, that on the other side of this realm, that it's being watched in the same way that we like to watch TV shows and movies, that our lives are watched elsewhere. In fact, I think the idea is even kind of hinted at in The Simpsons that the aliens like to watch it. I'm not necessarily saying it's aliens, but I get that sense. I get that sense. And I'm playful with it. And when Zach's describing me this story, it literally sounds like a scene from the TV show Seinfeld, for those of you who are familiar with it. Like that, the ridiculousness of the Amish and the Chinese buffet and the truck driver. Like that's the sort of thing that TV show would show. And like, first off, that really tickles me. But then secondly, it's also a really good opportunity. Like when you begin to, one of the reasons why I think of this life experience in this realm from this sort of TV program sort of perspective is it makes it easier to begin to disconnect from who we are in this dream, to become lucid. And so I asked Zach, I kind of introduced the idea. Zach, I really milked from him this story. He's like telling me the story like really fast. I'm like, no, don't rush it. I'm asking all these questions because it was such a great story. And then I told him afterwards, I'm like, I like to think about, that our life here is being watched elsewhere. And he, he's thoughtful. And he's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then I asked him, I was like, so for the people who are watching this show where the character of Zach is one of the main characters, how would they describe that character? Like, what are the qualities? Like, think about Seinfeld. We know the qualities of Jerry or the qualities of Kramer or George or Elaine. If they're watching the show about Zach, what would those qualities be? How does Zach show up? And I asked him that question, like, as a way for him to really begin to think about how he shows up in life, and hopefully to lead to the possibility where he can begin to separate, like, who he is from that character on how he shows up, in the same way that there is a distinction between commanding your hand to move and it not moving to actually moving your hand. Like, there is a distinction. We don't consciously think that we are acting as a character, but if we ever were to get really still and honest with ourselves, we can recognize that there are learned character behaviors that we show up in life in. And that character, each of us has the potentiality for the character. It's that character that holds the paradigm and the matrix in place. So the ability to be able to recognize that character which each of us may play in this dream, when we begin to become more skilled in the recognition of that and the difference between who you are and who that character is, and possibly how that character came to be, is when you begin to learn the skill of being lucid in the dream and detached from the matrix. So there's another part of that story, but I'm going to skip that just out of timeliness. So a little bit about your friend mkwann here. The last 9 months, I'll go back to the last 9 months for me has been, it's been a really introspective 9 months, more introspective than normally. And maybe even the last 3 years have just been unlike any 3 years in terms of how I've lived. And these last 9 months of introspection has really been about, what have I learned? What have I done? What do I want to do? All of these sort of things. And in these last 9 months, I've been living, and you can see the rock behind my house. I've been living at my friend Ron's house. And This is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I've really had a phenomenal 9 months. But these 9 months have, I'm ready to birth, if you will. And so it's the 12th right now, and on the 1st of November, I'm going to really step into the next stage of this dream in which I'm experiencing, and what that's going to look like. I'm up here in Harrisburg, PA right now. Is I'm going to go down to St. Petersburg, Florida, and I'll be down there for the winter. I'll be doing a couple things down there, but one of the things is I'll be taking care of like some family business, if you will. And knowing that this was happening, and knowing how I like to move and how I like to flow, I had set up the journey in a certain sort of way. And one of the ways I've set up this journey is I very specifically wanted to leave on November 1st, which is the Day of the Dead. And if you've been following my work for a couple of years, you know that the Day of the Dead, that at least in the last 2 years, very interesting things have occurred. And so my trip is purposefully lined up with that. And even more so, I will be going down. It'll take about 7 days to make my way from Harrisburg down to St. Petersburg, Florida. And I will be staying with people who are directly or indirectly connected to some of my past Day of the Dead experiences. And so I'll be going from here down to Floyd, Virginia, and then I'll go to Charlotte, and then Folly Beach, South Carolina, and then eventually make my way there. And so I share that with you because in these last 9 months, I have increased a lot of my content over the summer, but I've also been admittedly a little bit under the radar, particularly as it relates to my personal life. And so just wanted to share that with everyone and kind of set the stage for what is to come. But now we're going to wrap this video up. And so this has been a little bit about games and stories and awakening the becoming lucid in the dream and all of that sort of stuff. And so I want to end this way with a game. And I indicated when I talked about the Dennis Rodman principle, I showed the link for downloading the Grounding Consciousness course. And during these past 9 months, I set it up in such a way that there'd be a mechanism which, as long as I have to have some interaction with the matrix, which there's a difference between interaction and entanglement, I want to do it as frictionless as possible. And what that means is, like, in order to bring in currency. So I set up the Grounding Consciousness course of really, really valuable information for people who are interested in the skill of what it means to become lucid in the dream, and to what it means to disentangle from the matrix. Like, that is what I have to share. And yeah, there's the link, and you go and you download it. So I set that up. But now we're going to make it a little bit more interesting. Before coming back to this image right here, I had the Ultimatum Game. So this is what we're going to do. Full transparency here. So I have listed, it's on, that course is $119. And it's on a web platform called Gumroad. And if someone purchases it on Gumroad, they purchase it for $119, and 2 weeks later, I get $100. Gumroad keeps about $20 of it, and the payout is usually about 2 weeks. And that's good, and it works for me for a variety of reasons, but it's not perfect. And so there's this thing called the Ultimatum Game. And the Ultimatum Game falls underneath the concept of game theory. And it's one of the techniques which is used to manipulate everyone in the dream. And so this is how the Ultimatum Game basically works. Is you have two people, and there's a sum of money. And one person gets to decide the split. So let's say if it's $100, the one person gets to decide the split. Okay, I get $50 and you get $50. But they could say, I get $99 and you get $1. Or they could do something in between. And then the other person decides yes or no. That's all they get to decide. And so what's so interesting, the reason why the Ultimatum Game is so interesting is because of what it shows about behavior of the masses, and then also behavior of the individuals. And this sort of information has been used to really, really study people and to identify certain characteristics. But that's not exactly what we're going to do here. What we're going to do here is we're just going to play the game. And what I'm going to suggest right now, as I said, on the Gumroad, it's not ideal that you go and you get grounding consciousness on Gumroad, but I think it makes sense to everyone. If you've watched this far, this will serve you. I guarantee that. But the way Gumroad works doesn't exactly, it's not my bet. It's not the greatest thing for me. So let's make a little bit of fun. And so this is what I'm going to suggest is, if you're watching and you're interested in it, you can definitely go to Gumroad and you can buy it and you download it right away. And that's good. The one good thing is I don't have to do anything. Like, all I got to do is wait 2 weeks, and then I get money and it pays for gas when I'm driving down to Florida. But because we like this gaminess, and because we want to add this whimsy into this dream that we find ourselves in, I want you to send me an email if you want it, and you give me a dollar amount. Like, if you say $100, like, that's what I would get immediately, or that's what I'd get anyway from Gumroad, but I would receive it immediately. Like, that's a no-brainer. Like, of course I'm going to say yes. But if you were to say, all right, mkwann, I'm going to give you $60. I'll give you $60 for it. And then what I'll do is I will send you all the files. I'll send it to you through a file transfer service. So there's a little bit of effort for me. But I'm going to say yes or no. And if the answer is no, there's no other way. We can never go and do this again. Like, that's it. If you want to get grounded consciousness, you can go to Gumroad. But this is your one shot. And you go and see what happens. Let's go roll the dice. What sort of mood am I in? Where am I with my relationship with needing to put gas in my tank? Likewise, if any of you are watching and you're like, hey, I'm willing to purchase this for $1 million, like, I may say yes or no to that. Because part of the ways which I remain disentangled from the matrix is I've purposefully have not had income over the past 6 years that exceeds the amount which is required to file taxes. Like, I purposefully bring in less than $10,000 a year so that I don't have to worry about any sort of tax law violations, because I'm not filing any paperwork. I've lived like a king, but I found a way to live in this dream without having to play that game. That's an example of being disentangled from the matrix. So also, if you want to go and offer me $1 million, I might have to say no to that, because now I'm going to have to be stuck having to become more entangled with the matrix than I need to be. So that is my offer to you, friends. If you've watched this far, think about what you want your offer to be. Send me an email, and I'm going to send you back a reply. And my reply is either going to be a thumbs up, like the emoji of the thumbs up, or the emoji of the middle finger. And that would be no. All right, my friends. Until the next time, thank you for your attention. And I hope to hear from a bunch of you. Take good care.